Welcome to the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melanie Jackson. I'm a clinical and research midwife with my PhD, and each episode I cast a critical eye over current maternity care practice by grappling with research and historical knowledge to help you get the best out of your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Hello, Rebels! Melanie Jackson with you here. And the big news this week is that the Great Birth Rebellion podcast has just ticked over to 1 million downloads. 1 million downloads. I don't know really how to celebrate that except to tell you that we hit 1 million downloads and also that we're taking a break from normal programming today because I'm going to share my birth stories with you. I was interviewed recently by Anna from Sacred Birth International, and she has a podcast called the Natural Birth Podcast, and she wanted to ask me about my birth stories. And I thought, how better to share with you my birth stories than one that's already been recorded with another co-host, because it could get a little bit boring for me to just ramble on about my births. So Anna takes us on the journey of my personal birth stories as we celebrate the 1 million download mark for the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. I hope you can learn from my story and see where my rebellious roots started and how they were expressed through my own personal births for my 2 home-birthed babes.
Hi, Melanie, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today. I'm such a fangirl. I absolutely love and adore the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. You're doing such amazing work in the world. Such a fan. I mean, I send my clients your podcast episodes, concerning them, right? You're so good at making this research, this boring stuff that no one has time or energy or want to read, accessible to mamas, to birth workers. I absolutely love and adore what you do in the world. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging in all the episodes. And, podcasts are only meaningful because people listen. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful that it's out there and that people are listening and that the hard work pays off.
Yes. I hear you. It is a big job doing podcasts, isn't it? And such a pleasure too. And, you are one of the people that I also have as a resource for my sacred birth workers in my birth worker mentorship. I think that it is like, if anyone's listening who is a birth worker, like go on and listen to your podcast because you're just keeping that evidence-based, up-to-date research out there for people. And it's amazing how research and evidence-based research really points towards physiology being like the safest for mums and babs who are healthy, normal women, right? And so anyways, today we're not going to be diving into the facts and into the evidence and into the research. We are actually going to explore your birth stories, which I'm really excited about because I know nothing about them except that they were home births. And so with no further ado, please take us back to, becoming pregnant. Was that a conscious choice or was it a whoopsie-daisy, here we go?
Yes. So I guess part of the pre-story is also that I was already a midwife and I was already a home birth midwife before I got pregnant. So I worked for 4 years as a midwife, not having had my own babies and not having been pregnant at all. And so I was 24 when I started midwifery. I know a little baby. And prior to that, I'd done naturopathy. So I was, I was into it. I was really keen to learn and really understand how the body works. So both naturopathy and midwifery are modalities and, they're qualifications that understand that the body has just a physiology that works in a certain way. And these 2 ways of being with the body and therapies for the body just support physiology. And so that was my mindset already. And so that led me into being a home birth midwife, which obviously I took through into my health journey and also into my pregnancies and births. So fast forward. I was doing my PhD, which is called Birthing Outside the System. So I started that when I was 26, and I was 28, nearly finished the PhD, and actually also celebrating my 10-year wedding anniversary. I know. And when we got married at the, very spring chicken age of 18, we didn't really have the money or the time to go on a honeymoon. So we kind of got married and went back to university and carried on with life. And so at our 10-year anniversary, we were both working in our professions, and we thought, you know what, it's probably time that we actually stopped for a minute, take a holiday together, relax, celebrate the fact that we got married. And so we kind of did a 10-year honeymoon, and we traveled by car all around Australia and stayed at these beautiful places, which we could now afford because we were two professionals with no children. And so, when you're childless and you have plenty of time and you're relaxing and you book places with spa baths on the veranda looking over rainforests, there's not a whole lot more to do except have a lot of sex.
Yeah.
And so we just chilled out, hung out together, had sex. We were kind of not too we were willing to have a baby just whenever it happened. It wasn't for us like we didn't have a time frame in mind. I was quite thin at the time, which I think probably impacted my menstrual cycle. It just was how I was built. I didn't intentionally try and be thin or, restrict calories or anything like that. I was just quite active, ate quite healthily, and didn't have a lot of body fat. So, I kind of thought this could take a while. My cycle's not very regular for whatever reason. And so we just kind of started trying to see when it would happen. And I'd say we just got super relaxed, and our bodies got the message that we were having some downtime and it was okay to welcome in a baby. So that's where we conceived our now 11-year-old son, Charlie,
Wow.
probably in a spa bath overlooking a rainforest, I'd say. It's pretty cool.
Pretty romantic.
Yes. And then because I had the experience of just having irregular periods and never really knowing when they were coming, I didn't really realize I was pregnant until I had very sore boobs and I couldn't understand it. It was a new thing. I was like, whoa, they're so sore. I can barely touch them. If I'd bumped them, it would be just agony. And I thought, ooh, hang on a second. Maybe we are pregnant. So did a pregnancy test, and yes, we were pregnant. And at the time, we were living with my parents because we were building a house. And it was kind of, the build had only really just started. So we kind of had a plan to stay there for half the year while we were waiting for this build to finish. And so, again, as I said, I was a midwife, still at uni doing my PhD, still seeing clients as a home birth midwife, and trying to build a house while also staying very relaxed and present in my pregnancy. And that pregnancy was at the beginning really frightening because I kept getting these little bleeds. So I would sort of feel a gush and there'd be blood. And then I would think, oh, what was that? And the first time I just thought, okay, well, maybe this is the end of my pregnancy. And, this happens to people. But because I was research minded and super interested in the theoretical understanding of this experience, what was happening to me, I started researching, and I discovered that when about half of the women who are pregnant will have a bleeding episode through their pregnancy at some stage. And I thought, oh, okay, it's 1 in 2 people. This
Wow. I
is
didn't even know that. It's that high.
Yeah, I didn't either. I
Yeah.
didn't, for me, a lot of the women at that time were booking in with me, they were past their 10 or 12-week
Yeah.
period, and maybe the ones who had experienced that had already experienced it, and then, the ones who hadn't.
Would that maybe be included like the implantation bleeding then for them as well?
Potentially.
Yeah.
This is what my early thinking was,
Mm,
could it be an implantation bleed? And so just this, when you start bleeding in pregnancy, you start to try and not connect with the baby in
mm,
case it's not going to stay.
yeah.
So I had a little bit of that, but then I also had this sense that he was fine, that
Yeah.
he was actually okay. And so it was this really confusing time. And actually, my grandmother also moved in with my mum and my dad at that time. So it was her and my mum and dad and us all living in the same house. And I'm from Cyprus and she's Cypriot, so doesn't speak much English. And she, my mum said to her one day in Greek, "Oh, Melanie's bleeding." And everybody else around me kind of didn't calm me. But she said, and she's had 5 babies, she just nodded and she said in English, "Yes, this is how it is." And I thought, oh man, that was nice.
Yeah.
I felt calm when she said, "Yeah, this is what happens."
Yeah.
And that kind of mimicked what I'd read in the research that, 50% of women are gonna have a bleed somewhere in their pregnancy, and my grandma, who just, obviously didn't seem to have any fear about this, just kind of went, "Yeah, yeah, we bleed." So, that just kinda kept happening for the first 16 weeks, and, I spoke to my midwife about it. We agreed that, like, to over supervise this situation would do nothing.
It wouldn't change anything, no.
No, like, we could have ultrasounds every time there was a bleed, and I did a few times because I was like, "I just wanna know, is the baby okay? Should I be preparing for losing this baby? I don't know." I wanna be able to mentally prepare myself, but that's a really Western way of looking
Yes.
at pregnancy, where you
Yes.
want to make a plan and you wanna know what to expect. And, we're not comfortable with just not knowing how my
No.
baby is. So, I was grappling with this because I was a home birth midwife, but I also really wanted to know.
Yeah.
And, um, but then I took comfort in knowing also that, so yes, half of the pregnant women will have a bleed. But if you do have an ultrasound or you do use a Doppler to find out what your baby's doing and your baby has a heartbeat, only 5% of those babies will be lost to miscarriage.
Yeah.
So I was like, "You know what? I do wanna know if my baby's got a heartbeat right now, so that, again, I can cognitively and academically place myself in the 5% possibility or the 95% possibility that my baby will be okay." So I did have an ultrasound and he was fine. And they just said, "We don't really know where this blood is coming from, but yeah, you're bleeding. It's not from your placenta. It doesn't seem to be from your cervix." So that was enough information for me. I was like, "It's not my placenta. It's not my cervix. My baby, medically, from what they could tell me, was fine." So I was like, "Great. Okay, carry on." All of that stopped around 16 weeks. But at 16 weeks, I had this really profound sense that he was going to be an early baby, born before full term. I don't know what it was, but I felt profoundly that I knew him. I knew he was a he because that's just what I felt intuitively. I was like, "Yeah, he's a boy." And then I do feel like he also gave me his name. So right from the beginning, I was like, "His name is Charlie." And he's so sweet and he's gorgeous and he's fun loving and he's like balanced. Like he just felt full of bliss. Like is the only way I could describe it. And later I'll tell you about my other pregnancy where I felt completely different about her personality. And they have actually rung true to what I felt in the
Mhm.
pregnancy. So I feel like women do have a knowledge of their baby, a profound
Yes.
knowledge that can't possibly be explained, except that we're really clever and that we do know
Mm.
our babies.
Yes.
Um, and that kind of knowledge has been illegitimized in
Yes.
today's society.
Here, here.
So, right. But I
Mm.
leaned into it. I was like, I know this kid. I know
Mhm.
he's a boy. I know his personality. It's there from the beginning. There's something in him that I know.
Mm.
And then I knew he was okay, but I also felt like he was going to come early. Either he was telling me or something in my body was telling me he's going to be an early baby. And at that time, one of our clients was around the same gestation as me, and her waters broke 16, 17 weeks. And I thought, whoa, yeah, that could happen. Like, it's really sad. But I was at the same gestation and I was having these thoughts, my baby's going to come early. And I kept saying to him, I said, don't you break your waters too early. I said, you're going to be born at home. So don't break your waters.
Mm.
And there was this, I don't know, I repeated that mantra through the pregnancy at various times. Don't break your waters. You're going to be born at home. Don't come too early. We want to have you at home. So the pregnancy continued. Again, I had no other children. I was the master of my own time. The only thing that I couldn't control was when my clients had their babies. So again, I was, keeping busy through the pregnancy. I was exercising, eating well, being very well cared for by my parents and my grandma. And, it was a nurtured time. And I told the builder of the house, we're having this baby at home. So you need to have it finished by the time my baby's going to be born. I want to move in at like 35 weeks. And he's like, yep, sure, no problem. We'll have it. Absolutely, we'll have it done. I think everybody who's ever built a house knows where I'm going with this part of the story.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
So
never on time ever in history of buildings.
I know, of course, we get pregnant and want to have the baby in that space. He had 8 months from when I told him to have the house finished.
Uh,
Anyway.
never works. It never works. It never works.
And so we
Mm.
carried on with the pregnancy. Everything was beautiful. I had some repetitive bouts of thrush, which I kind of got on top of with various natural therapies, but it was just this constant kind of, I needed to constantly take probiotics and all the fermented foods. I really limited any sweet foods and carbohydrates. Like, I just was trying to keep it under control. And, pregnancy is just a ripe time to have flora imbalance in your vagina. It's just like sometimes part of people's pregnancy. And I learned later that it was a really significant part of my mum's own pregnancy. And so there was some kind of inbuilt microbiome imbalance that just plagued this pregnancy, despite all my efforts and knowledge as both a naturopath and a midwife. I'm like, why is this happening? So it was just a process of staying on top of that. But otherwise, really uncomplicated pregnancy. And I told my midwife, I think this baby's going to come early. How do you feel about that? If I go into labor at 36 weeks, I'm planning on still staying at home. She said, oh, Mel, first time babies never come early. Like, she kind of brushed it off a little bit, which was fine. I was like, you know what? I'm ready. I know that if I go into labor at 36 weeks, she'll be ready. I just wanted to check with her, like, how comfortable would you be to come? I was having a preterm baby. Hang on, my husband's just coming into the office. You can cut this little bit out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can hear the background noise. Okay. Sorry.
That's all right.
And so, yeah, it went on. We moved into the house at 35 weeks. It was not finished at all. And I had given and as we realized it was not finished, I'd given the builder instructions of which parts to finish, basically the parts that were most important for birth. So I said, I just want the bathroom and this bedroom and, some basics in the kitchen. We need to have the water attached. And we had a fireplace so we could keep the house warm. We didn't have air conditioning, which was fine because we live here in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales in Australia, and it gets quite cold. And it was March, so it was coming into the colder season, so we were okay for air conditioning. We weren't going to get too hot. We could definitely keep ourselves warm. We could, there was water and we were sheltered. But the gas wasn't attached and the hot water was gas. And so we were trying to get hot water to the house and having cold showers at that time. Anyway, so we moved in 35 weeks, and then 36 weeks and 2 days, I started feeling tightenings. And we didn't really have much in the house. I'd set up our bedroom. There was, again, some basics in the kitchen. I'd set up a room for midwives to sleep in. That was the only purpose for that room, was a midwife sleeping room. And my husband woke up to go to the gym, and I had been contracting through the night just really mildly. Oh, I forgot a great part of the story, actually. Let me go back. My friend who lived in India was also pregnant. And she called me the night before I went into labor, and she said, Mel, I'm in India. My waters have broken, but I haven't gone into labor. She's like, I'm really frightened that I won't go into labor, and then I'm here in India and my waters will be broken and I can't go to one of the Indian hospitals. They're just terrible. She was planning her birth at this birth center, and she said, I don't want to go into the Indian hospital. So she rang me. She's like, Mel, just pray for me. Pray that this is all going to start. And so as I was going to sleep, I was praying for my friend that her labor would start and that she would have her baby without any complications. And then in the middle of the night, when I woke with my own contractions, I thought, oh, this is just a reminder to pray for my friend. And so, I thought for her, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. She's in labor. She's in India and her water's broken. So I just woke again, prayed for her again, and my contractions continued. And then when my husband woke up, I said to him, oh, just so you know, like I'm having some contractions and I don't know if this is the start of anything, but, he said, oh, should I go to the gym? Is it okay? I was like, yeah, go to the gym. I mean, it's only just started. It's not like I'm going to have a baby soon. And while he was at the gym, the sun was coming up and I just felt sort of the contractions really starting to take over and intensify. And I thought it could just be a little peak in contraction surges, in intensity, or I don't know, maybe things are really going fast. And so I called him. I said, I think you should come back from the gym. Things have just gotten a bit more intense. And he said, should I call the midwives? I was like, no, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to call them too early. That seems a bit, over the top. It's my first baby. And so a few more hours, and I said, maybe, call the midwives, just tell them it's sort of started, and I don't know, it feels like they're close together. So one of my midwives actually lived down the road. She was close. And so she popped in, and I said to her, look, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's really close. I can't really work it out. So she said, I'll just hang around for a bit. So she hung around, and then she goes, yeah, I think, things are really picking up. Your contractions are really regular. I mean, I am going to call the second midwife to come. Yeah. And I thought, whoa, maybe I am closer than I thought. I was feeling fine. They just had started to pick up. So then both of them were there, but then the labor just went on and on and on. And there were periods where it stopped. And, I thought maybe I need to eat, maybe I need to rest, maybe I need to hydrate. So by that evening, the first midwife, who lives close by, she went back home to her family. The other one tucked into bed because she lives a bit further away, thinking, oh, well, maybe in the evening labor will pick up and we'll have a baby. So I had also invited my good friend and my sister to be there at the birth periodically, just for support and love, and and so things went on through the night, and people were kind of up and down, sleeping and resting and waking and supporting, and I was doing some laps around the house. And at one point they said, we can fill the bath for you, but I knew that there was no hot water. I say, don't fill the bath. Honestly, there's no hot water. There's no gas. It's all cold water. And they said, no, we're going to do it. So they boiled kettles and the urn, and they got camp stoves out and put pots on the camp stoves. And there were just apparatus everywhere heating water. And so they managed to fill the bath with enough hot water for it to be comfortable. So at one point I got in there for a rest to just like chill out.
Mm.
And while I was doing that, they thought, you know what, let's fill the birth pool. Like, let's get the whole birth pool full of warm water for her so she doesn't have to stay in this uncomfortable little narrow bath. And again, I was like, don't do that. That's crazy. That's a massive birth pool, the inflatable birth pool. That's huge. There's no hot water. They did, though, back and forth with the urn and the kettle and the this. And I just kept contracting, and it went on and on. And then the sun came up the next day. So we're kind of looking at 24 hours or so.
Mm.
And I said to the midwife, like, who was still there, sweetheart was still there.
Mm.
And I said, maybe you could check me to find out what's going on. Like, these contractions are back and forth and they're not really doing anything.
Had you
And I
not
was also,
had one the whole kind of 24 hours? You hadn't had a vaginal examination?
no, I hadn't had any.
Yeah.
It wasn't our usual practice, even as home birth midwives. I wasn't in the habit of doing vaginal exams
Yeah.
routinely. So I had no idea where we're up to. We were all just kind of waiting,
Yeah.
seeing what would happen. And that was early in the morning. And she said, okay, you're 7 centimeters.
Mm.
Like, great, 24 hours, 7 centimeters, not a bad effort. I'm encouraged by that.
I love that
And
so much. And I love, like, I just want to pause and go, like, for everyone listening, like, listen to this. Like, this is a midwife. She's encouraged, because this is the thing, isn't it? The risk of vaginal examinations. And so many women go like, oh my God, I'm only this. I love that you had a different reaction. Love that. Like, pin that, everyone, in your minds for your own labor.
a long way. I mean, it's such a lot of work that your body's done,
Yes.
because there's pre-work that your cervix and your
Mhm.
uterus does before you go into labor.
Yeah.
And then there's shortening and thinning that happens before you even go into labor sometimes. And then there's the work that the Braxton Hicks are doing on your body. And,
Mm.
as a first-time laborer and mum, your cervix, it has to open and thin out, and it does so much work. So 7 centimeters to me was
Mm.
like, all I've got to do is fall over the finish line, it felt,
Yes.
at
Yeah.
7 centimeters. Like, that is the work done.
Mm.
And then as the sun came up, everything stopped.
Yes. So normal.
Really normal. Melatonin is so important for the activity of oxytocin.
Mm.
And in a longer labor, especially with an earlier preterm baby, your body knows when everybody and every part of your body and your baby needs a rest.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
labor is a stress on our body in the same way as if you were working hard at a marathon, at something physical.
Yeah.
The longer you go and the harder your muscles work, they get tired and lactic acid builds up, and they just need a time of replenishment.
And your baby too, especially preterm baby. Like, the wisdom, let's not forget, of the baby. Like, there's a birth dance between you and the baby. It's not just you, right? That's birthing the baby. The baby's birthing itself. And I really believe that sometimes those physiological plateaus that you have spoken about in your podcast, also are for the baby, and sometimes initiated maybe by the baby as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you and your baby are connected, intimately connected on so many levels. Even a physical level, we're connected. The baby has implanted itself into your body via its placenta. Of course, it's sending you hormonal messages. At the very least, we are intricately linked, and we know when our physiology is ready for labor. We know what to do next. And so, yeah, I had definitely an earlier baby, and earlier babies, they might experience the stress of labor differently to full-term babies.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, of course, if it's a longer labor, my baby might be getting tired with that or stressed with that. So we were blessed with a rest. And I, at that time, noticed just some pillows on the floor there. And I thought, I'm going to have a little lie down. I'm feeling a bit tired. My husband was asleep in the bed. And I fell asleep between the wall and the bed, just on a pile of pillows. And I didn't know at the time, but everybody else was looking for me for quite a few hours, not really sure where I'd gone. And they didn't, I know they didn't want to come into the bedroom because my husband was asleep. They'd have to have come through the door and around the bed to discover where I was because I was down low. So for a few hours, they were just sort of going, where did Mel go? She's just gone. And then I emerged from a few hours sleep and still with no contractions, thought, do you know what? Maybe just start your day in the same way that you start every day. And for me, I wake hungry and I thought I'm going to go downstairs as I normally would. I'm going to have a big breakfast. We all had a big laugh because my husband asked my sister if she would make him a coffee. And she went, yeah, of course. She had kind of been responsible for making coffees for everybody all through the birth, which again had just been going now for over 24 hours. And she grabbed the decaf coffee jar and he said, oh, no, that's the decaf. I'd really like one with caffeine. You know, I want to be ready to go. And she had this look on her face, which told us all that for the whole time she'd been making everyone decaf coffee and no one had been caffeinated through that time. And so we all had a bit of a laugh. And, you know, I ate a full big breakfast. And then the other midwife came back who had gone home to her family overnight, you know, with some renewed energy for the birth space so that my other midwife could have a good rest. And she said, let's go for a walk. Let's go out onto the street, do some laps, see if we can walk the baby out, get some contractions going. And I was so reluctant. I was tired, physically tired by then, you know, with just sleeplessness. And I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to walk the streets. I don't want to. And I remember sort of standing there a little bit reluctantly protesting. And everybody was getting me dressed and putting my hair up for me. And someone was putting my shoes on. And I thought, you're not getting out of this. Everyone is going to shove you out the door to get these contractions going. And I knew that it was for my own good. I knew why they were like, we're doing this, Mel. We're going for a walk. We're going to get it going. Because remembering, now I'm kind of outside really any medical expectations of a normal birth. This had been going on for a while. We were now having a physiological pause in the labor. My baby was preterm. You know, it doesn't look good if you present to a hospital like this, you know. And I kept saying, I'm not going to hospital. I'm not going. There's nothing wrong with us. My baby's heart rate was fine. We were checking the heart rate periodically. It was fine. So went for a walk for about an hour. I thought we wouldn't go for a very long one, but they kept pushing me to the next hill. Let's do the next hill. Let's do the next hill. And I finally lost it when I said to my husband, I need to do a wee. I'm busting to do a wee. And he's like, just squat behind that bush over there. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? I've been in labor for all this time and now I need to do a wee and I just want to go and do it in the toilet. How dare you? How dare you suggest that I wee in the street at this moment? So I kind of stormed home and I had 2 heat packs on the side of my belly because my ligaments were sore. My uterine ligaments were sore and I had been holding these heat packs on while I was walking the streets. We've got a photo of it actually, of my midwife with her arm linked under one of my arms, just kind of dragging me up the hill and me holding the heat packs. And we got back home and again, we were in the afternoon. It was coming up to like 2 or 3 o'clock. No contractions. And we were all just kind of standing around going, well, what do we do? What are we going to do? There's no contractions. And I said to my midwife, I was like, check again, check what my cervix is doing. So this was probably maybe 6 or 7 hours after the first vaginal exam. And I remember I was sitting on the toilet and she did the vaginal exam. She's like, you're fully dilated. You're fully dilated. I was like, and I started crying because I was like, right, we are really, really close. This is coming to an end, you know, but we still had the problem where there was just no contractions.
Hmm.
So how is this baby going to come out? And so one of the midwives said, what if we get an acupuncturist out here?
Mm.
I was like, yeah, great. I mean, if you can find someone who's available and willing to come out, absolutely. I mean, we're going to try everything here because I'm not going to hospital. I
Yeah.
know what they're going to do there. I'm going to get there.
Mm.
They'll break my waters. They'll give me oxytocin. Then when my preterm baby is born, he's going to be small. He's going to be preterm. They are going to want to get him off to special care unit. There's all kinds of protocols that occur around these scenarios. I didn't have a GBS swab. I didn't have gestational diabetes testing. I didn't have all the things that they would have expected of me. I knew the battle that I
Yeah.
would be putting myself in. And I was like, we're 10 centimeters. Surely we can do the rest here. We can work this out.
Mm-hmm.
So the acupuncturist came and she said, she basically she checked my pulse. She did all of her things that they check. And she said, I'm going to work at bringing the baby down low now. You're fully dilated. Let's bring the baby down low into your pelvis. Like, yep, great. Not feeling any pressure to push. We need, that'd be
The
great.
head was
The
still
baby,
high. Yeah. That's why you didn't have that urge. Yeah.
correct. No
Mm-hmm.
words, just fully dilated. Sort of standing there
Mm.
going, well, what do we do now? We actually, it appeared as though I'd been fully dilated for a while. Uh, when I looked at the notes, actually, again, all the timings get very vague as you retell your story. But from the notes, I recall that from the time that they knew I was fully dilated to the time I had my baby was about 8 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in hospital, if you're fully dilated, they just assume, okay, you're ready to push, you're ready to have your baby.
And they make
This
you
idea
push. Yeah.
you push, this idea of being fully dilated and not having a baby is quite foreign,
Mm.
even to me, and I was looking at the midwives. We were all three of us home birth midwives. And I was like, have you ever seen this before? And they're like, nope, have not seen this before. So, okay, we're all just doing something new here.
Yeah.
So the
A
acupuncturist,
variation of normal, right? I mean, I love this because this is how we learn. Like, there's so many variations of normal that you never see in the hospital. You never see it because it's just managed, because it's seen as pathological, where it's not. And I love this story so much. I love that there's three home birth midwives go like, we have never seen this. We're in new terrain. And like, you just go with it. I love that so much. So much
well,
wisdom.
yeah, but I mean, we can also look, we go, yeah, this is new, but it's not pathological because
Exactly.
we've got things that we can use to work out if we're now moving into a stage of pathology.
Yes.
And my blood pressure was normal. I was well hydrated. I could still wee. I was eating. My baby's heart rate was normal. The waters weren't broken. There was nothing to trigger us to even think, gosh, maybe we should go to hospital.
Love, love,
Because,
love.
yeah, everything just seemed normal, despite the fact that it was just taking ages. And we were fully dilated with no urge to do anything.
Mm.
So we thought, great, let's get this acupuncturist in. We were also thinking, this baby is young. It's preterm. There will be a point where he runs out of energy, and we would love for him to be born before that happens. And so she put the acupuncture needles sort of over my tailbone and lower back. And I felt her kind of put them in and then take them out and move them down and repeat this action with a few different positions. And then in a minute or two, I just went, whoa, like it let out this incredible primal noise as I felt my baby slip down and like clunk into my pelvis
Wow.
with whatever she did.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, he moved down. And she went, great, now let's get your contractions going. So she repositioned the needles. And from the minute they were in their new positions, the contractions just started.
Magic.
It was pretty instantaneous from what I experienced. It wasn't like we tried this and tried that and tried this and finally something worked. It just worked. And this was an acupuncturist that, I came to understand was exceptionally good at her job because, she became our family acupuncturist after that. And she's a genius. And so this happened. Okay, contractions are back. She would tweak the needles every few minutes and I'd get another big contraction, another big surge. And so then I started moving about. I went back onto the toilet here and there and here and there. And then at one point I was sitting on the toilet and I could hear my midwife and the acupuncturist kind of chatting out in the foyer outside the bathroom. And the acupuncturist came in and she goes, so I want to put a needle in your perineum. So for anybody listening, your perineum is the space of tissue that sits between your anus and the vaginal opening. It's nice and
Horrified.
well, I remember just kind of looking at her and thinking, I don't think I have a choice here. I think,
Yes.
we are trying things to get this baby out. I want the baby out. It's time. I know that the reason she's here is to remedy this pause that to me does not feel like I want to continue anymore. So I was like, you don't have a choice. If you want to have this baby, it's either a acupuncture needle to the perineum or you go to hospital and accept whatever it is that they're going to offer you. So I was like, mate, I mean, what do we have to lose? I can either wait and keep doing this, or I can try the perineum acupuncture needle. So then, so I just remember looking at her a bit blankly while I tried to gather up the brain cells to make this decision. And my midwife came to the door and she just yelled out, "Do it, Mel." And that was all I needed. That was, all I needed to make the decision. I was like, okay, let's do it. So I went ahead, positioned myself on the bed. She found my perineum and she said, it'll just be an in-out needle in the perineum. I was like, okay, let's do it. So in out, the perineal needle went. And there was another big shift in the labor process. And so And then I said to my midwife, like, we were contracting and contracting and contracting now with the needles. But I said, well, what are we going to do? I don't even feel like pushing. I don't have any urge whatsoever. She was like, I don't know, maybe, again, we're all working with just unknown terrain here. She's like, maybe you just start pushing. Maybe just like try. I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good use of energy right now. I mean, again, what other choice do I have right now? So we got the birth stool out and I just started bearing down and pushing, hoping that it would do something. And it did. So out started bulging what I thought was the baby's head, my baby's head. And we were like, great, yeah, it's working. Like, let's just keep doing this. And I was coming up and down off the birth stool and I was moving a bit and repositioning and then back onto the birth stool. And everyone was there really excited. Cameras are out, like, there, we can see the head. And then my waters just burst everywhere, like explosive, like Hollywood style labor, water bursting. And I was like, great, in my world, when the water breaks, the baby's not far behind. And cool, we're going to have a baby. So then I started pushing again and there was nothing, no head, nothing coming out. And it became pretty obvious that what was coming was just the bag of waters that I'd sort of forced out of my body. But we kept going and I kept pushing and the baby did start to emerge. And it wasn't really until he was almost fully crowning that the physiological urge to push really took over. So I was sort of at full stretch. And I remember getting to full stretch and thinking, pretty sure I'm at full stretch. It's not that bad.
Mm.
Just in my head going, okay, yeah, that's just what it feels like. It doesn't, I feel like I'm at full stretch, but I wouldn't describe it as painful
Mm.
or uncomfortable, really. Just I'm stretching. So that was cool. I was like, yeah, not that bad. People sometimes talk about it as the ring of fire, but I was like, it's not a ring of fire. It just feels like I'm at full stretch. So then a few more pushes and he was out on the I was sitting on the birth stool and we have this picture of myself and my husband capturing him and bringing him up to my chest. And he was so little. He was tiny. He cried straight away. He was beautiful and pink. He came straight up to my chest, but immediately I was like, wow, he's really small. And so I got up comfortably on the bed and I knew about preterm babies. I'd mentally been preparing that I was going to have an early baby. And so I'd been learning more about what's called kangaroo care, which is a technique that people use in less resourced countries to care for early babies and babies that are unwell. And the idea is that you just keep them on your skin. And I'd bought this stretchy, warm, stretchy wrap that I could wear. That would mean that didn't need to leave. I could kind of be hands free in a way, and he would still be able to be nestled on my chest. And we know about kangaroo care that actually your body can sense the temperature of your baby and adjust the temperature of your chest to regulate the baby's temperature.
Yeah.
And, with preterm babies, they haven't got a lot of the brown fat that normally full-term babies would have. And this is what they use to keep them warm. They use it for their early energy supply before their mum's milk fully comes in. They're supposed to put that brown fat on and then use it up as energy over the first few days. It's why babies lose weight in the first few days, usually, is that they come with a packed lunch and with enough fluid, to survive until their mother's milk fully comes in. So I knew, I'm like, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have any energy reserves to keep himself warm, to keep his blood sugar up. And if a baby gets cold and their blood sugar drops, the next thing that happens is that they struggle with breathing, with respiration. So immediately I was like, right, I know what this baby needs. He's little, he's preterm. He needs to keep his blood sugar up. He needs to keep warm if I'm going to be able to ensure that his respiration doesn't suffer.
Yeah.
So he was beautiful. He actually latched onto the breast. And that's another thing with early babies is not always, the suck reflex is not always there because that's a later reflex that develops. And so I was like, great, first hurdle, he has a suck reflex. He was breathing beautifully. He was lovely and pink. He was functioning like a normal baby. And then we weighed him and he was 2.3 kilos.
Yeah.
And I know you guys might measure in different measure, but here in Australia, if a baby is under 2.5 kilos, they usually just automatically send them to the special care nursery for while they grow up, because they know there's some complications that could happen and they want to observe them there. So my midwife kind of dutifully said, these babies would normally be nursed in the special care unit at hospital. Would you like to take him to hospital? She knew what I was going to say, obviously, but, for our documentation, we need to kind of report. Yeah, I advised my client that maybe she should take this baby to hospital, and she declined. So yes, I was like, do you know what? I can look after him. I can do this. And so we hand expressed a little bit of milk out just in case he didn't feed regularly. And I thought, at least I know that I could top him up with some breast milk if he, has trouble latching. So we did that. We put that in the fridge. And my placenta, when I got into bed and I was caring for him, and then the contractions started again for my placenta, and immediately said to the midwife, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the placenta. It's like, I'm so tired. And, the contractions had stopped and it had been so long. I don't want to. I don't want to. And so I said that to everybody. I don't want to do that. And luckily, the acupuncturist was still there. And they gave me a big, strong cup of tea, of raspberry leaf tea.
Mm.
And then the midwife said to the acupuncturist, if you got to, can you get it out? Like, is there a spot? And the acupuncturist went, yeah, I can get it out. So she popped a needle in and I just went, bleh, like, again, another kind of really primal noise, and out plopped the placenta. And that was done. And I was like, okay, we did it. But now after something like 36 hours of labor, it was the evening, the sun had gone back down again. So, everybody else was sort of finishing up their jobs. And then they were going to go home to bed, which made total perfect sense. But my work had just started because I had a preterm baby that I was going to nurse at home through the night. It was just me and my husband. And he was going to need to sleep for sure. And there's nobody who could replace the care that my baby needed, my little Charlie, my little 2.3 kilo Charlie needed. And so I just rallied. I was like, radio, now you have to feed your baby. In my head, I was like, he needs to be fed every hour. So I kind of was very alert through the night. And obviously I must have dozed at some point, but my whole, I was just completely focused on caring for him. So he slept on my chest. Again, he latched multiple times through the night and had a feed. I did give him some of the expressed colostrum at one point, probably maybe just as a insurance policy. I don't know if he actually needed it, but I was like, just give it to him, it won't hurt. And he was great. He never skipped a beat. I was never worried for him. He was fine. And actually, labor prepares babies for life as well. Yeah. Having been through labor with contractions, he got the message over and over and over again that he was about to be born. And there was enough time from the very first early contractions for his body to start responding to being able to breathe air.
Yes.
So I think that he needed that long labor.
Yeah.
I didn't need the long labor. But maybe he did. And, that's a wisdom that we won't ever know why that had to happen. But he was well. He gained weight. In fact, he gained 0.5 kilo in the second week of his life. And he thrived. He did get jaundice, but again, we just did some sun exposure for him, periodic sun exposure, and he kept feeding and he was well through all that. So we didn't do anything about the jaundice other than what we were, already doing. And he was beautiful and fine. So
beautiful.
That was Charlie.
I love that. What a birth story full of wisdom and variations of normal. Wow. I love that so much that you did do that care for your own son at home as a preterm baby. With all the wisdom obviously you have as a midwife, you knew all the things that was important. But that is just the best care to be on mum. It should just be standard. I mean, it is the superior way. Then mimicking mum in the, in the incubators of little babies in the NICU or special care nursery.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So much.
Yeah. Better. So, and then he fed for ages, probably about 2.5 years until we started to, I thought, well, I wouldn't mind having another baby. And so I decided to night wean him because, again, my cycle hadn't returned yet. And around that time, I was offered I had finished, oh, that's right. I was still in the middle of at the end of my PhD. And so all through his early years, he would live in the carrier while I was trying to finish my writing, and I'd take him along to conferences. There were times where I presented to huge rooms of people with my baby in the carrier. And at the time, I also got offered a lecturing job as a midwifery lecturer. And I said, I've got a 4-month-old baby, right? And they said, yeah, we just expected that you would bring him. And I was like, great, that sounds great. So I accepted a job as a university lecturer while I was finishing my PhD and looking after this baby. And everybody around me was so supportive. The uni said, yeah, bring him. I would pick my mum up on the way to the university lecturing job, and she would sit with Charlie while I lectured, and she would just bring him to me if he needed a feed and if she couldn't get him to sleep or something. And that's how it was. And so then soon after that, as he grew and I graduated from my PhD, I was offered an opportunity to work for the Australian College of Midwives on a project that they're working on. And it was around that time where I thought, oh, maybe I could have another baby. I was like, no, just delay it till after you finish this contract. It was a 9-month contract. I was like, there's no way. I was traveling all over the place. There's no way I can have a baby and travel. And, no. Mm-hmm. So I finished that contract and I was like, right, I'm ready to have the baby now. But again, still my cycle hadn't really regulated itself, which I wasn't too bothered by because I wasn't trying to have a baby earlier than that. But then, it was more regular, but a bit long, I thought. I was like, well, it's a bit long. I don't know that this is a good cycle to conceive on. So I went back to my acupuncturist who had helped me have Charlie. And I said to her, I'd like to have another baby, but I'm pretty sure my cycle, the whole cycle's not quite synced up properly. She's like, right, here's what we're going to do. She said, have a period. And then she gave me a schedule of which days I was to visit her based on a menstrual cycle. So we kind of started after the first day bleed of my cycle. And I visited her incrementally. So then we knew roughly the period where I was fertile. And so, she'd do something on that day and okay, off we go, have all the sex. Mm-hmm. And then I'd go back to her and we'd do things. And then I, again, just want to reiterate the wisdom and intuitive knowledge that we have in our bodies as women to know what's happening in our bodies. And so there was one day where I said to my husband, pretty sure that conception attempt worked. Like, I feel like that did the trick. And about a week later, after that, I went back to the acupuncturist and she said, well, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. It all feels really right. It all feels like different. Something is definitely going on in my body. And she's like, okay, great. So she did another treatment. And then again, a few days later, I went back and she's like, how are you feeling? And I was like, yeah, still really strong, still feeling really certain that I'm pregnant. And we did a pregnancy test and it said, no, you're not pregnant. I was like, that's crazy. I don't believe that. And she checked my pulse. Acupuncturists have this way of working with the body. And partly they can learn things from your pulse. And she said, I can feel it. I can feel the baby. You are pregnant. And I was like, I knew that. I knew I was pregnant. And the test just hadn't picked it up, which is fine. I kept testing. It kept saying negative. And then one day we were all, myself, my husband, and my son, Charlie, getting ready to go into the city to see this art exhibition from one of my favorite artists, Frida Kahlo. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, I just can't shake this feeling that I am pregnant. Again, I did another test, negative. We went to the exhibit. We enjoyed the exhibit. We looked at all the works. And then the next day, I tested again and it was like, yes, you are pregnant. I was like, right. This is baby Frida. she is definitely here. I'd already felt her. I just felt like I needed that confirmation from that
Yeah.
pregnancy test. So immediately I was like, she's a girl. And I felt strongly what her personality was again. She was fiery. Uh,
Mhm. Like
described her as
freedom.
Frida. I described her as a little bit dark, like different energy to Charlie, who was really light and joyful and just easygoing. She felt like a force that I
Mm.
was going to need to um, manage in some way, but also not.
Yeah.
She's 7 now. Frida is definitely a Frida. And so her pregnancy was completely different.
I'm
I
curious before we go on though, like when did your pregnancy test pick up that you were pregnant? At
I
what
think
day or week or whatever?
it was, if I can't remember so much, it was well after the 2 weeks that they normally say,
Yeah.
memory. But I just also didn't really believe any of the negative tests. I was
Yeah.
like, no, there's no way. I'm so pregnant,
Yeah.
100% pregnant. And so, yeah, I don't know when, I can't remember when. I've still got the little pregnancy test
Do
actually. It's in a box.
you? Oh, that's so cute.
I know, 3 little pregnancy tests in that box.
Right.
And then I vomited all the way through till about 17 weeks with her.
Ah,
With
was that
Charlie,
different? Hmm.
it was different. With Charlie, I felt nauseous a lot,
Mm.
and I kind of managed it by managing my blood sugar levels. I felt that with him, if I just didn't get too hungry and I snacked often, that was enough to feel a little bit normal. With Frida, it was overwhelming. I just never knew when I was about to vomit. I felt
Mm.
constantly like I was going to vomit. And I didn't know when it was coming, just persistent nausea. And again, I went back to my acupuncturist almost every second or third day just to get some relief from the nausea. And with her, I vomited more often, just all kinds of places, on the streets, in pot plants, wherever I was, there was people always coming up to me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm pregnant." And it would just be this weird, just never knew when it was going to come out. I was at a cafe once and somebody walked past with a plate of food and just the smell of it triggered. I had to run out of the cafe and find somewhere socially appropriate to vomit. And again, I was still seeing clients. So I remember coming in and out of births and just having to vomit and then coming back in. And it's just this, I ended up making these little vomit packs, which had a vomit bag and some tissues and some water and a snack in them. So I would just, if I needed to vomit, I was like, okay, get the vomit pack out. So we just continued. We were really, women are just stoic and strong with that. And, I'd vomit a few times a day and just have a drink and get on with it. And my little son, Charlie, who was 3 at this time, when I was vomiting, he would just come up to me and stand next to me and hold my hand. And one day I was vomiting and he said, "I don't think I want to watch you vomit anymore." And I was like, "You don't have to. You don't have to. It's been very kind of you to sit with me while I have been vomiting, but you don't have to." So, um, yeah, it wasn't too debilitating. I kind of just got on with it as we do
Right. Yeah.
women. Um, Again, I thought we're going to have an early baby. That's just maybe how I do it. My mum had early babies as
Mm.
well. I was an early baby. And I thought, then I had one. I was like, well, this just must be how we have babies. So I was just preparing for another 36 or 37 weeker, quite happy that that might occur. I didn't have the bleeds this time. And I also didn't have the thrush. I managed to really get on top of that I ended up using sort of vaginal probiotic suppositories, which did the trick. It
Mhm.
wasn't consistent, but it was just like this maintenance process. And so I got to 37 weeks and I thought, where's the baby?
Mhm.
Why is the baby coming out? And she moved really differently to Charlie. Charlie just was always sending me messages that he was fine. Frida had just, she was so sluggish, like not interested in performing, not interested in giving me any information about how she was. I felt like she was just using me for my uterus. Like I said it to my husband multiple times, like the minute she's born, she is just gonna be her own person. I feel like she doesn't really need me. She just is like this child who sort of knows she needs to grow within a woman in order to be alive, and then she's going to be her own person. So I felt that. And yes, she was Frida. So we named her Frida before she was born, just knowing who she might be. And then 37 weeks came, and 38 and 39 and 40. And I kept saying to my midwife, where's the baby? What is going on? And she's like, Mel, it's just normal. It's just a normal gestation. I was like, yeah, but I thought you would be born at 37 weeks. So at 40 weeks, I kind of gave up even thinking I was ever going to have a baby. And I said to my husband, let's just go out into the bush, go for a big walk. So we went bushwalking and we played in puddles and we played in this river. And then I went to a restaurant and ate this massive bowl of food. Like I just had kind of given up. I just doing whatever I wanted to. It's like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm going to eat that. I'm going to walk there. I don't care. And that night, my my mum, who was going to come to support me at the birth, at my next planned home birth, because we had Charlie now, so I wanted her to be there for him. She rang me and she said, our car broke down. And so I don't have a car to be able to come to you if you go into labor. And I was like, oh no, this is terrible. So her and my dad and somebody else drove them into the house. I said, come and get our second car. We had two cars. I said, come and get the second car and then you'll have a car. So they came up and I said, we'll order some nice dinner. And, I'm done with caring. We're going to order dinner in and you guys come up and you can take our car. And so they came. And while we were eating dinner, I started to get contractions.
Ooh.
I know. So I didn't say anything. I thought, no, I'm never having a baby. It's nothing. So we were just eating our dinner. It's probably about 6 o'clock. And they didn't really stop. They kept going. And around 7 o'clock, my mum said, oh, well, we'll head home. I didn't tell anybody at that point. I didn't know what was going on. I just was denying it. And then she said, we'll head home and now we're all fine. We've got the car. And I said, actually, do you want to just stay for a bit? Maybe I sent my dad home with the car. I said, could you stay for a bit? I don't know what's happening, but I think something's starting, and maybe just stay and put Charlie to bed for us, so we can maybe get the birth space ready. That was about 7, and around 7:30, I was upstairs trying to give my mum instructions on where his pajamas were and, what we normally do to brush his teeth and, which book was his favorite for bedtime. And I was holding onto the door frame. I had to take breaks for how strong the contractions were. And I just remember going, oh, forget it. Just have a look. You'll find everything. And I went on into my bedroom, assuming she was just going to look after him because I couldn't get a sentence together enough to explain his bedtime routine to her. And so I went into the bedroom and things just kind of really kicked in and started really strong. Stronger contractions than I'd ever felt through any part of Charlie's labor.
Mm.
And I texted my sister at about 8 p.m. And I said, I think maybe I'm in labor, but I'm not entirely sure, just kind of a heads up. That was 8 p.m. And Frida was born at 10:30 p.m. that same night. So things just started and progressed and just went like a steam train. At one point, Charlie came in and I was on the floor. We had wooden floorboards, so it was quite hard. I was just down on my knees on the floor. And he said, Mama, you're going to get sore knees. And he raced off and he grabbed all these towels from the linen cupboard and started stuffing them under my knees while I was in the middle of a contraction. It was the sweetest thing ever.
Wow.
And then, yeah, and then he sat on the chair in my bedroom and just watched for maybe 4 or 5 contractions. And then he said, I'm going to go to bed now. So, it was just a regular day as far as he was concerned. He'd nurtured me through my vomiting. And now he sort of watched a bit of labor and went, okay, I'll see you in the morning. We knew he didn't want to be woken up for the birth because I'd talked to him about it. I was like, do you want to see Frida be born? He said, yeah, I'll watch if I'm awake, but don't wake me up. I don't want to be woken up. So I double checked with him, still the same. He's like, don't wake me. Cool, no worries. So I was reluctant to ring the midwives because of what happened last time.
Mm.
And so we got to 9 o'clock and my husband's like, do you think we should call the midwives? It's like, no, last time we called them too early and it took ages, and I just don't call them because I don't want to inconvenience everybody like that again.
Mm.
And then little did I know, probably 20 minutes after I said that, he just took it upon himself to call the midwives because he kind of knew what was going on. And so one of them arrived and went, well, yeah, you are having a baby, man. So she called the second midwife and they quickly started getting the pool filled. And because I was planning a water birth again this time, I didn't have Charlie in the water in the end. And I was kind of like, when is it full? Because, whoa, I am really getting ready to have this baby. And I got in and there was just no gaps. There was these really short gaps, enough for me to kind of just have a few breaths and then another one would start coming. And I looked at the clock one time and I said, by 11 p.m., I was sort of getting angry with the process. I said, I'm going to be in my bed by 11 p.m. Like, there's no way this could continue any longer because of how strong it was. And so it was strong because it was just working really fast. And I was so excited to be in labor because I was done with being pregnant. I did not enjoy the pregnancy much. I felt really physically incapacitated. I couldn't garden. I had rib pain, so I couldn't crochet. Two of the things that I usually did to really decompress and relax. And so I was done. I was like, I can't wait to just be able to use my body in the way that I want to use my body. And so then I started to feel this physiological urge to push that I hadn't had with Charlie. And it was overwhelming and I just surrendered to it. I was like, thank you. I have to put no effort into this right now because I did not want to push like I did last time. And she started to, I could feel her move down and I put my own finger inside to sort of see if I could feel her head. And I could, about sort of 2/3 of my finger could go in before I felt the baby. And then again, I had another big push and I kind of poked around again. And again, it was like 1/3 of my finger I could feel. I was like, wow, that's really moving down. And then the next contraction, I felt her head put pressure on my perineum and I started to stretch again. And the feeling was familiar because I remember it with Charlie. And I thought, we're at full stretch again. Again, it's not that bad. I was like, okay, cool. We're at full stretch. And then something overwhelmed my body and I started hysterically laughing. Hysterical, like a mad woman. And I remember thinking I could suppress it, but it felt so good to laugh. And so I kind of made a conscious effort to not suppress that feeling. And I laughed in the way that I felt like laughing. And then I heard one midwife say to the other, what's she doing? It kind of looked really hysterical. Just kind of, well, I hate that word hysterical. Sorry for using that. But just like a really like exaggerated laugh that I couldn't control. And I just said, oh my gosh, I'm just so happy. And this was just the point where my baby's head was nearly born. So I'm floating in a pool, just laughing hysterically at full stretch, ready for my baby to come out. And so her head was fully born, and I was like, great, next contraction, we're having this baby. So I had the next contraction, but there was no urge to push her out. And I thought, oh, that's weird because like I felt really strong urges to get her head out, and that felt really easy to for her head to come out, but there was no inspiration from my body to push her body out. And I just thought, oh, that doesn't feel right to me. I feel like my body should want to push the rest of the baby out. And I just said to my midwife, all I could get out with was get her out. Like I just instinctively said, I want you to get the baby out. And so she put her hand in to feel for the shoulder and went, oh yeah, the shoulder's a bit lodged there. And with the next contraction, just kind of did a little bit of an internal shoulder dystocia maneuver to bring the baby out. I didn't feel like I had a shoulder dystocia, but it certainly the baby didn't come with that next contraction. And then also something didn't feel right in my body. I felt like I should have wanted to push her out. Like my body should have wanted to push her out at that point. And so I just said, yeah, do the thing, get the baby out, please. And so she did, and she came out, and I was so grateful for my midwives in that moment, not because I think that they rescued me from a complicated situation, but that they worked with me, that I sensed that I wanted their help. They didn't question that. They just stepped in. And then I brought her to my chest and assumed she was fine and just kind of like took a breath after having the baby. And one of the midwives said, you might want to just talk your baby in, and I looked down and she was quite floppy and unresponsive. And I thought, whoa, I didn't even notice her condition. And as a midwife, that's one of our main jobs, but I was not in my midwifery mind. I was
No,
in my
you were the birthing woman. I think that's also key information, like for all birth workers, that when you're birthing a baby, you're not the midwife or the birth worker. Like you can't really do that for yourself. Like you
and I
shouldn't.
didn't yeah, and I didn't want to. I had them both there.
Mm.
People ask me, "Are you gonna have a midwife at your birth?" I was like, "Yeah." It's a big responsibility being a midwife in the birth space. I know what that responsibility is. I know, the things that I want to sort of, oversee so the woman doesn't have to occupy her mind with
Yeah.
these things, so that she knows, I don't have to, if I don't want to take responsibility over certain parts of this birth journey, I can comfortably put some things in the hands of my midwife. And
And it
so at
helps
that
you
point,
drop into liminality too, and like into that birth bubble. Otherwise, you're in your neocortex having to like think and assess and be logical. I mean, you need to step out of that to birth a baby.
yeah. So I
Mm.
didn't have to think, is my baby okay? Because I knew that all I had to do was bathe in the experience
Yeah.
and do what my body was asking me to do. And then if there was a problem or something that needed attention, that my midwives would notice that. I didn't have to bring myself out of any state in order to give myself or my baby attention. So it was kind of in that moment I went, whoa, yeah, you do need a bit of help. So I gave her a little bit of a rub and I breathed on her face, because one thing that triggers a baby to breathe is to know that it's in air. So they were just kind of accentuating that experience for her. And she cried and breathed and pinked up beautifully, well within, you know, normal limits. So it was just that she was born a little bit less vigorous than Charlie. But that can also be waterborne babies as well. They just take a little bit more time to come in. So I don't experience her birth as complicated in any way or as her being compromised. It was all just managed in a really timely way. She did not suffer. I didn't suffer. Both births, I didn't have any tears, even though, uh, with that second birth, there was extra hands in the space. I just felt really soft and open for those births. And if I had to choose a birth experience again, I would definitely choose the hard, fast, like wild journey of Frida's birth. It was less exhausting. And, when Charlie was born, I thought, oh, thank God, finally that's over. And I cared for him in a really cognitive way because of his needs and because of the length of the labor. With Frida, it was just like the hormonal cascade felt so much more intense, and I really liked it. And so much that when I was getting out of the birth pool, my placenta was still inside. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do that again. That was the best. And he said at that moment, he's like, what do you mean again? It's like, for the next baby. And I was like, and he said, no, that's it. There's no more babies. And I was like, what? Do you have to tell me that right now? I haven't even had my placenta yet. And so I said, let's just talk about that later. And anyway, placenta again was born just fine. I crouched over a bowl and pushed the placenta out. And she was 1.5 kilos heavier than Charlie. She was a whole month older. Of course she was. She fed beautifully. Obviously, I had no concerns for her, but she was intense in her personality, as I had experienced her in utero. And yeah, that was Frida, completely different to Charlie.
It's amazing how they show you who they are. Both, obviously, you could sense it beforehand, but through also labor.
Yes. And I knew they were fine through the whole thing. I never felt like anyone was in danger. And, birth is usually like that if you leave it alone. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that so much. What incredible stories. Thank you so much, Nell, for sharing that with us. So much wisdom in them. Now, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
Mm-hmm. The mental work of being ready for labor, it kind of needs to be done beforehand. So we can physically manage labor just fine. We're definitely strong enough. We can do that. Your body will do it. The part of you that won't do it, if you don't want it to, or if you have some things going on, is your mind. So people often say, oh, it's painful, it's this, it's hard, it's, yeah, it's a big day. It's a hard day sometimes for women. But labor is mostly a mental game. I found even through my labor and now as I've been with women for 16 years in birth, is that physically their bodies most of the time get there. The thing that holds them back and the thing that stops them from having the birth that they were hoping for is usually not a dysfunction in their body. It's usually that their mind takes over, sometimes gives up on enduring the process. Sometimes we have to just really do a really hard thing. And it's this constant self-talk of like, okay, you did one more, amazing. So one of the mantras that I had through Charlie's birth was when the contraction went, I said to myself, you can do another one. And so I told myself that immediately after the contraction went, to kind of remind my body and my brain that we could. So when I went into the next contraction, I kind of almost forgot what the previous contraction was like. All I remembered is that I told myself I can do another one. So I started to believe it. So if you tell yourself that I can do another one, and the other mantra was just like, it's just a stretch. It's just a stretch. So as the babies were coming out, I didn't get frightened of that sensation. I just reminded myself, it's just a stretch. Soften and open with that. Don't clench and tighten. And so it's about checking your own messaging? What are you telling yourself in your mind? Are you saying, this is too hard? Oh my gosh, I can't do it. This is too strong. How long is this going to go for? This is horrible. That hurt. You can say those things a little bit, but if you live there in your labor, it's going to be a really short amount of time before you try and be rescued from that experience through the use of pain medication to kind of take it all away, because you've told yourself over and over and over, this is too much. You can't do it. This can't go on. So you almost have to fake it till you make it a little bit, even if you don't believe you can do it in that time. Just tell yourself, you can do another one. Say the words in your mind out loud. Or instead of saying, no, not another contraction, say, yes, another contraction, because every contraction you have is a little bit closer to having your baby. And then further than that, now that you know this, if you're listening to this and you're pregnant, you can mentally prepare yourself to tell yourself those things. But then you can also prepare the people around you to tell you those things. So if you have someone around you who is on board with your plans to have whatever birth it is, and you're in labor and you say, oh my gosh, it's so sore. I can't do it. And they say, of course you can. Yes, you can. You can do another one. Let's do one more. And then when that one's done, we're going to do another one together. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. That can change a woman's mindset and help her go through every single individual contraction. The alternative is that you say to your care team, your support people, oh my gosh, it's so sore. I can't do it. What am I going to do? This is too hard. And they say, yeah, well, maybe what about just an epidural? Like, of course, in that moment, you are going to maybe accept that, because what they're saying is we don't think you can do it. We don't think, if this is so big for you and you're asking for pain relief, maybe you should just take it, because we don't think you can do this. And so you lose hope in yourself, because people around you are kind of sending you subliminal messaging that you can't do this. And so I would really acknowledge that you need to be mentally prepared for labor, to talk yourself through it, because there will be points in your labor where your mind says to you, this is too hard, this is too big, I can't do it. Maybe I should have an epidural. Maybe I should have a cesarean section. Maybe I should accept this thing and that thing. I don't know. Prepare yourself to be able to talk yourself around that and persist in whatever it is you're planning. That would be my advice.
I love that. I love that so much. I couldn't have said it better myself. One thing that I say to my, clients is, you can do anything for a minute. To have that as a mantra, like, I can do anything for a minute. In a minute's time, this will release. Like, I will have a pause. So, like, mantras in labor are so powerful. And I love, that you talk about the mind, because it is the biggest hindrance, isn't it? And one of the biggest reasons why I started this podcast, to help women reprogram their subconscious mind, this birth narrative of fear and medicalization that is so imprinted in all of us. Like, we all need to kind of reprogram ourselves into believing in the body, believing in this process, believing that we can do it without outsourcing to experts outside of ourselves, right?
And part of that, it's great if women can do that themselves. And then you have to find a care team that matches your intentions. So in anything, if you are sitting in a really a medicalized mindset where you want interventions and a lot of monitoring and a lot of supervision and all that kind of stuff in your birth, for whatever reason, if you go ahead and choose a care team that is focused on helping you achieve a physiological birth with no interventions, there's a mismatch. You're going to be dissatisfied, and they're not perfectly equipped to help you in your plan. And it's the same way if you think, I don't want any interventions. I want to have this birth with very minimal intervention, only if what I need. I don't want any pain medication. I don't want any vaginal exams. But then you go ahead and choose to give birth with medical practitioners in a private hospital, again, there's a mismatch. They're focused on a more medicalized approach. So firstly, it's about understanding what your own philosophy, preparing yourself for that, but then making sure you've surrounded yourself with people who are going to help you achieve the aim that you have that for your birth. So there has to be a match as well.
So important. So important. Like, don't hire a surgeon for your natural physiological birth.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. You're gonna fight now for that birth instead of being supported.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mel, for all your wisdom. Again, everybody listening, the Great Birth Rebellion, an epic resource for all mamas to be, birth workers, birth nerds, everyone. Head on over and listen to Mel. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
To get free access to all the research that's used to create each podcast episode, you can join the mailing list at melaniethemidwife.com, or you can join our members hub and financially support the work of this podcast. In the hub, you can ask me questions, and premium members get access to a monthly Q&A episode where I answer listener questions. You'll also get episode transcripts and additional resources for each podcast episode. All the details are in the show notes.